Right now in Seoul, after the South Korean president declared martial law, I want to bring you up to speed on what we have just seen in the last 20 minutes or so. This was the scene at the entrance to the National Assembly in Seoul shortly after President Yoon declared martial law. CNN affiliate JTBC were on the ground moments ago as parliamentary members were trying to gather. Soldiers, though, were blocking them from entering. Clear images of the military. You can see them in these other pictures from moments ago. All this happening after the president said this.
I declare emergency martial law to defend the Republic of Korea from the danger of North Korean communist forces, to eradicate the shameless pro-North Korean forces that are plundering the freedom and happiness of our people at once, and to protect the free constitutional order.
Well, I want to bring in Kenneth Choi, who's the international editor for the Korean newspaper, the Chosun Ilbo, and of course Mike Valerio, CNN's man on the ground in Seoul. Let's talk about who the South Korean president is, his background, former prosecutor. He's taken a very strong stance, Mike, against North Korea, and tonight in calling martial law, he called out what he called communist elements, anti-state elements within the opposition. Just explain who the president is and what his position is.
Well, we have a very conservative President, Becky, and he is trying to show strength in all of his moves against North Korea, be it any kind of military provocation, trash balloons that have flown over the DMZ from North Korea to South Korea. He has tried to respond in a huge contrast to the more liberal governments that we've had in Seoul over the past few years, with belligerent rhetoric, walking up, I don't want to say just to the line, but tension simmering and trying to be a very strong force rather than trying to come to the table with reconciliation with Kim Jong-un, trying to negotiate how they're going to move forward. You don't see that with this government and with this president, a very strong line against North Korea. But we're trying to decode exactly what he means in this speech. This is the first time we have heard that language of, from his point of view, North Korean and communist elements in the government that he needs to stop. What I think everybody should know, Becky, is that this is a very unpopular president with his approval rating in the low 20% range, and forces that are in the opposition party in parliament in Seoul have tried to impeach him for months, if not years, saying that he is a weak leader, ineffective, and he has lost the mandate of the populace across South Korea. So a question that is being asked at this very early morning hour is if this was a power play from the South Korean president to try to tamp down in one of the most heavy-handed ways possible on protests that are in every corner of the country for every single weekend. I can tell you, living in Seoul, you hear protests that call for the removal of South Korea's president, those protests echoing throughout the streets every single Saturday. But one has to think, what would be the end game here? What could this possibly lead to? This is befuddling, to say the least. So many of us who are wondering, what is the exit strategy of Yoon Suk Yeol, going back to a time when South Korea was ruled by a military dictatorship in the 1980s. What we're watching, I should point out, with these pictures, these are protesters who are trying to get into the National Assembly. And Becky, news since the last time we talked to you a couple of minutes ago, we are getting reports and are confirming reports that members of the National Assembly are being blocked from getting back inside that building. Their mission for tonight is to get back in the National Assembly to try to undo this, to try to cancel the declaration of martial law. And we have reports that there are members of law enforcement who are blocking members of the National Assembly from coming back in and trying to re-vote, I shouldn't say re-vote, to try to hold a vote to undo this measure. So we will be waiting to see if these lawmakers are allowed back in the building. We're getting the supplies that we need to head on down there as well, because that seems to be certainly the epicenter, the cri de coeur, to try to stop this stunning move that has unfolded within the past 2 hours.
Resign or get impeached. Tonight, that is the ultimatum for South Korea's embattled president.
This comes hours after he declared martial law, only to have that order reversed by Parliament. Derek Waller is in Koreatown in our area now with new reaction.
Maurice, Christine, good evening to you from Koreatown here in Midtown Manhattan. And South Korean President Yoon's decision to invoke martial law sent shockwaves throughout the Korean community, including right here in New York. Disturbing video showing South Korean soldiers invading their own country's parliament through broken windows after the nation's embattled conservative President Yoon Suk Yeol declared martial law.
국회의 계엄 해제 요구가 있어.
In a late-night address accusing members of the liberal opposition party without evidence of plotting with North Korea to stage an insurrection.
What is kind of a shocking news.
Kwang Kim, president of the Korean Association of Greater New York, tells me, like the U.S., the country is deeply divided along ideological lines. But Tuesday, there was bipartisan agreement. The National Assembly quickly voting down the martial law order, calling it unconstitutional. Yoon bowing to pressure and rescinding it. The power grab backfiring.
Why current administration made that decision? That's a big question to us.
There's no reason, for him to do that for the Korean people. I don't know why.
Martial law, a sensitive topic for Korean Americans like Julie Yu, owner of this West 32nd Street cafe. She lived in South Korea under a dictator's rule in the 80s.
I remember, when I was young, I remember that kind of things happen. He has to take care of all of Korean people, but he's not, I think.
And many experts consider South Korea's democracy one of the most advanced in the world. And today, yes, it was tested, but it held. In Koreatown, Derek Waller, CBS News, New York.
Just talking to all of these people, South Korea is so proud of how far the country has come since 1980, since the last time there was martial law spread throughout the country. We now have K-pop, K-cinema, soft power is so strong that South Korea exerts. And I can tell you there are people from grandmothers and students, everyone in between who's gathered here. They're really afraid and concerned that this is a blemish on South Korea's reputation. The world now knows that things are incredibly unstable here. And there are allies of President Yoon Suk Yeol who are concerned, and people in the opposing party who are concerned that North Korea perhaps would see this moment as a moment of weakness and do something that, we don't even want to go into that realm of possibility. So there is serious concern about what this has done to the reputation of South Korea and the ripple effects that this means going forward.
It's very calm here right now on the front steps outside South Korea's National Assembly, and that's all the more striking when you consider how dramatic the events were here overnight. In the immediate hours after President Yoon Suk Yeol made his late-night announcement on Tuesday imposing emergency martial law, lawmakers flocked to this building, and at times they confronted several hundred military troops who tried to block them, and despite those confrontations managed to conduct a vote. 190 lawmakers voted to overturn the martial law decree, and among them were at least 18 members of President Yoon's own People Power Party, which has largely condemned the emergency martial law decree in the hours since. And in fact, by 4:30 in the morning on Wednesday, President Yoon had overturned his own decree. So now you have people that have gathered here. Many of them are holding signs that say "Resign Yoon," gathering for a rally here. Many of them very angry at what their president tried and now apparently failed to do. His own party has called for the resignation of the defense minister. The president's chief of staff has resigned. And inside, opposition lawmakers have tabled a resolution calling for the impeachment of the president. It has plunged this country into political uncertainty. But amid that, what is also striking is how little this seems to have impacted ordinary life in Korea. The airport was functioning normally this morning, and in Seoul, businesses were open, people were bustling around in the streets, certainly talking about what has taken place, which was definitely a short-lived challenge to decades of democracy in this country. Ivan Watson, CNN, Seoul. There are thousands of people marching through Seoul right now to the president's office. This was part of a protest started by a labor union that is calling for the president to resign. People here chanting for President Yoon Suk Yeol to be arrested. This, of course, after he declared what may have been the shortest martial law the world has ever seen in an announcement Tuesday night that was followed by these dramatic events where lawmakers gathered in the middle of the night at the National Assembly. There were soldiers that tried to stop them. They failed. And ultimately, about 190 lawmakers voted to overrule martial law, among them 18 members of the president's own party, which has also come out condemning what he did. Before dawn this morning, he backtracked and canceled martial law. But now he's got to face with the aftermath of that. His own political party calling for his close ally, his defense minister, to resign. His chief of staff and a number of top officials have resigned. And meanwhile, the opposition political parties are preparing for an attempt to impeach the president. So he's really politically in hot water right now. But I need to stress the fact that even though there is, in effect, a form of a political crisis, it's not really being felt on the streets. I landed at Incheon Airport, the main international gateway to South Korea this morning. It was functioning normally. There was no unusual law enforcement or security presence there. At lunchtime, the restaurants downtown were full of office workers grabbing lunch. They were talking about this, and everybody I've addressed this with is incensed that the president tried to do away with decades of democratic governance in a move that really shocked this nation. But the political consequences look like they will be affecting this country for some time to come.
President Yoon is a principled man, and certainly he entered into these actions likely with some degree of understanding of what his risk entailed and what directions this might head. He probably feels that his cause was just, that in spite of the fact that it has on the surface the appearance of undermining democracy, this was all done in accordance with what the Constitution allows him to do. And so I think he, as a prosecutor, would love to have his day in court. Well, you know, there were people who had said this could have been one of Yoon's options for the past few months, given the deadlock in the parliament and the National Assembly. Unlike parliamentary systems where you would have an option maybe to dissolve the parliament and call for a vote, this Korean system with its 5-year presidential term, a single term, and this balance of powers really doesn't enable the president to do anything when he's in the situation where all legislative actions are being frozen by an opposition that's in the majority. And, you know, at the very least, you know, now the whole world is talking about South Korea's political difficulties. Yoon has raised this to a level of, you know, debate that wasn't taking place beforehand. So I think from Yoon's perspective, this may have been what he was either anticipating or hoping for in terms of being able to have, again, his day in court where the public can kind of weigh his case. Well, you know, he probably expected it to go much easier. He may have thought that he could have dissolved the National Assembly before it had time to vote on the impeachment. But it's worth noting that as soon as the vote on the, not impeachment, on the martial law, as soon as that vote on the martial law took place, President Yoon rescinded the order. So we see here, this is not a man who's trying to seize power or, create a second term or prolong his rule. He is using a very unusual tool, as it were, in order to try to, from the opposition's perspective, undermine democracy. From the ruling party's perspective, trying to get the ball moving. He probably thought he had much more support within the ruling party for his actions than he actually did, and that is, of course, what enabled the order to be overturned so quickly. North Korea is rejoicing. I think it's clear that over the past few years, North Korea has been extremely unhappy with President Yoon, his strong position on countering the North Korea nuclear capability with strengthening of the U.S. South Korea alliance, strengthening our nuclear deterrent, having a larger say for South Korea in nuclear planning. In many ways, President Yoon has been, just a thorn in the side of Kim Jong Un, and so I expect in the coming days we'll see rhetoric playing up the failure of President Yoon, the lack of public support, the fact that North Korea was right all along. This is not a guy worth dealing with. I don't think North Korea would take the step of seeking some type of provocative action that would try to exploit the current situation, because such provocative action would just play into Yoon's hands. It would reinforce, if you recall, this whole martial law was introduced by President Yoon as necessary because of a North Korea threat. North Korea trying to take advantage of the situation at that time would undermine, everything else they're focused on.